Chapter 2. My mind was a blank until I pressed the intercom button. "Who is it?" asked a quizzing voice. "It's me, Buzz and Tom," I muttered. "Jeff? When did you leave?" A question echoed back. I decided to cut the question short and responded that I needed some air, so I walked Roger to his car. "Roger left?" "Yes. Are we going to play telephone quiz? Hit the buzzer. Your doorman is starting to look like he's going to pull rank." As I rode up the elevator, I tried to make sense of the last half hour. My major question was, what did just happen? Why did he choose me to tell his story and then turn an interesting tale into a weird drama? And finally, just who is Roger Highborn? I made up my mind to find out more about Uncle Roger from Tom. Tom saw me as I pushed open the unlocked door. He was standing at the balcony rail and following the progress of a faint siren getting louder and then fading as it turned the corner on the street 14 stories below. I passed through the same crowd of faces I had seen about an hour ago. A nod here, a hi there as I walked toward the patio door and stepped out onto the balcony. As I had not seen or talked to Tom for over a year, to break the ice, I said, "Tom, got a minute before you jump?" "Only if you join me," he turned with a smile. "Just what is Roger's relationship to your family? I thought you said he's an uncle." "On whose side?" "He's too smart to be from your side of the family." I grinned and waited for his answer. My old friend had not changed much since our last meeting. Maybe a couple of pounds heavier due to less time for sport, but otherwise not much on the surface. "You know what I told you about Roger, because he has asked us not to share a lot of details about his life with anyone outside the family. Roger is a bit of a loner. However, he was there when Dad was in the last stages of his illness. Roger not only looked after Meg and me, he took control of the business when we could have lost everything. He just appeared one day and stayed for about a year, until things got back to normal. Then he left. The last thing I remember him saying to me was that the slate is now clean. He didn't take a penny, and he did not explain what he meant. He has always stayed in touch. He always remembers us on birthdays and holidays. He is a consultant of some kind. He has authored a few books along the same line as yours, and he stays out of the limelight. Lately, he's been uneasy. Maybe he's just getting old. Anyway, he called the day before yesterday. Funny he asked me how you were doing. I didn't know that you knew Roger that well. But then we've been out of touch as well. So I assumed you and he were working on something together because you seem to share the same viewpoint on life." "What do you mean?" I cut in. "You know, that Eastern outlook you have. Well, he has the same leaning. Always has. So I thought you may have met him through Meg. Roger was the one who introduced me to martial arts and Eastern philosophy long before you started to talk about that theory you wrote about. He helped us to see the bigger picture. Meg stays in closer contact with him than I and makes an effort to meet up with him whenever possible." Just then, Meg called out, "Hey, you two, is this a private party or can anybody crash it?" We turned to widen the space between us to invite her in. "Where have you been, Jeff? It's been about a year since anybody around here has seen you." Before I could reply, Tom said, "Meg, have you told Roger anything about Jeff?" She turned to me. "Roger and I talk a lot. We are really open. After your book came out, we talked about your theory that Eastern philosophy can answer emotional questions better than Western psychiatry." Laughing, she continued, "I told him you two should meet sometime. That was a few years back, when he spoke last. Roger wanted to know what you were up to. Say, did you finally meet Roger?" She asked with a wide smile that spread a glow across her face and made her look 20 years younger. "Yes," I replied, still in a fog, because I was still trying to sort out the earlier encounter with Roger. "Oh," Tom blurted, "I was under the impression you two had already met before tonight. That's why I just left him with you so that I could see to the other guests before the unholy four get a hold of them. I am sorry if I seemed like I just thrust him on you. Did you hit it off? You must have if you walked him to the car." This information was helpful in forming my answer. I did not want to upset either of my lifelong friends by telling them that their uncle was a raving lunatic. "No, we had a nice chat about the supernatural." I knew you two would get along, said Meg, with a triumphant smile and positive nod of her head directed towards Tom. But then I noticed a veil come over her eyes, and she would not meet mine. She was saved by Tom's comment that he had to get back to playing host. Before he moved off, he leaned next to my ear and said, I'm glad you met Roger. He's a bit strange, but so are you. Come over to the old house this weekend. He may be there. Also, it will be more comfortable, less people. Please come by. Talk to you later. With that said, he was off to greet the new arrivals from his office. I saw him step in between Joy and Amber and quickly introduce them before they could start in on their new victims. Meg tried to slide away, but I reached out to her. What do you know about this murder glass of Roger's? He told you about the glass? She looked shocked. I was on a roll to vent after being set up. No, he showed it to me, I hissed back. This news hit her like a cold pail of water. She inhaled deeply and shook her head. Not here. Not now, later. Let's meet at your place and I will tell you what I know about it. But he never showed it to me. She continued with a bit of envy. He once told me he was not going to get me involved in something that could change my life. At least that was then. I must go now. I can see you around 10 o'clock tonight at your place, okay? Jeff, one other thing. He told me that women are not meant to deal with some of the coarser levels of reality that the glass can reveal. It made me angry and astonished that he would say something so sexist. It's not like him. Well, I must go. I will see you tonight. I nodded in agreement and turned to look at the skyline. I knew I would never be able to drift comfortably around in the world I had created for myself, and Meg had just now reinforced the reality of what I had just experienced. I said my goodbyes on the way out to whom I really don't know. I merged the 1956 vintage Porsche onto the expressway and shifted up to 70 miles per hour. I feel alone, like a bird flying across the ocean. I am driving home on instinct. I need to think and prepare for Meg's arrival. She has been to my house only a couple times. The first time was for an after-the-fact party. Jane and I ran off and got married without telling anyone, but then felt we owed everyone a party. The last time Meg was there was when Jane died. Meg and Tom showed up and took over the arrangements for the funeral. This gives you a sense of how close, but how separate our lives have been. We could always jump in and out of each other's lives, just as if it were only yesterday that we had last seen each other, when in reality it had been at least a year. When a crisis struck, we could always count on each other, just like a blood family, or maybe even closer come to think of it. As I pulled up to my driveway, I said, "Open," and the garage door quickly obeyed. I snapped open the three-pronged belt holding me in the seat, switched off the ignition, and then it hit me. It was at a book signing party at the publisher's office to announce my book, Reflection of All Realization. Roger's publisher compared it to Salman Rushdie's books because it was a big risk to criticize Western and Middle Eastern cultures the way I had in my book. The publishers wanted to control the release of my book to a few trusted channels to get the word out, so they said. Roger Highborn was not formally introduced to me, but pointed out by Stanley. He explained Roger was the ghostwriter to one of the best sources on which I based my book. Yes, I remember wanting to meet him. Stan told me he would set it up. Later, Stan said, Mr. Highborn sends his apologies, but he just stopped in briefly. However, he would like to meet you. He asked that I call him with your schedule for next week. Well, things took off, and we never scheduled a meeting. I met Stanley Milnick after one of the first lectures I gave to feel out the climate for a book on religion and culture. He came up to me afterwards and told me to write a book based on my lecture. It's about time the world was put on its ass with a new way of thinking. Break the mold is the way he put it. I believe you could do it. If you have a minute, I'll buy you a coffee at the Starbucks on the corner. Over coffee, he convinced me the time was right. Since that day, we had been through hell and high water. I will call Stan. He can fill in the blanks. I got Stan's answering machine and left a message for him to call me as soon as he picked up my message. Then I walked over to my computer and sent an email to him to call me ASAP, and that it was about Roger Highborn. First a shower, then another call to Stan's office just in case he really was in and hiding in a manuscript. Half-hour later, still was no answer at Stan's office or to my email. I glanced at the clock. It was 8:30 p.m., and I hadn't eaten anything since noon except for a handful of snacks at Tom's place. I could start a quick dinner or wait until Meg arrived, then we could go out for a late dinner. No, she would probably have eaten by then. So back to a quick snack of the old standby peanut butter and apple butter on sourdough bread. The phone rings. "Hello, Stan?" I said as I lifted the receiver to my ear. "Hello, is this Jeffrey Porter? It's Roger Highborn. Meg just called and told me about your conversation at the party. Could we talk tomorrow, early before you start your day? For now, I ask one thing. Please do not involve Meg any more than she already is. You know a bit more than anybody. You will understand it in the morning. Listen to what Meg tells you. After your conversation with her, if you feel uncomfortable and do not show up at my hotel by 8 a.m., I will understand." I was just about to lay into him when I heard the doorbell ring. I turned toward the TV and clicked it on. Megan Highborn was waiting in the doorway. I glanced at my watch. It was 9:15. She was a bit early. I pressed the comm line and buzzer and I told her to come in. "Roger, you will have to excuse me. Meg is here." "We will talk in the morning. Remember, she is in the dark about this." "Thanks." He talked to me as an equal. No threat or condescending tone. "Good night, Jeff. Until tomorrow morning." And he hung up. I walked into the living room and saw her looking out the window. "I'm a bit early, but I thought we could go to that great pizza joint you're always raving about, if that's okay with you." "Sure, I could use a bit of food. I'll drive, or do you want to follow since it is so close to the expressway?" She looked at me a bit self-conscious. "I'd like to come back here and talk about the glass, if that's okay with you." We walked out the front door. "Lock," I said. "Locked," echoed back the detached computer voice. Meg stopped and looked back as the door lock clicked. She turned to me with a smile. "You still have this place wired to your command." "I remember now. I had to have a voice print even to open the oven. Is mine still on file?" "Try it. It's like an elephant. It never forgets." We walked down the path leading to the garage. The lights turned on as we passed the sensors. "Open," she said with a laugh. Nothing happened. "Try it again, but without the laugh." She took a breath and calmly commanded, "Open." The garage door obeyed, and she tossed her head and chuckled. "Do you want the top down?" She looked at the sky for signs of rain and said, "Okay by me. It's your car that we will get wet. Remember, you're in Seattle." I said I would risk it as I snapped the top down and clicked on the seatbelt. I took the curves down the hill just enough so the tires would squeal without picking up too much speed. Meg sat with ease, knowing that I knew every twist and turn of the road. She had fun exaggerating the turns, leaning as if we were going to tip over any minute. I pulled into the main drive of the little restaurant, and after a quick glance around the parking lot, I noticed no empty spaces near the door, so I pulled in front of the door to let her out. "Tell the hostess you're with me and ask for a table in the small room. It's quiet in there and we can talk freely. The hostess is to the left just inside the door." The valet, in another car, honked at me just as I noticed a safe spot. I gunned the engine and drove to the end of the parking lot, put the top up, and locked the car without glancing at the boy who would never get a chance to park the bathtub. As I walked into the small dining room, I was just in time to see Meg being seated at a table next to the California stone fireplace. This was a cozy area, next to the bay windows overlooking the hills toward my place. "Hi, Dee. How are your studies coming along?" "Great," she answered with a coy smile. "I have finals next month, then I start an apprentice program. I finished reading the book you gave me. It has given me a lot to think about. I just changed my major to philosophy instead of photojournalism." Just as I was about to comment, her father frantically waved from the other side of the room. "I have to go. The slave master beckons." Dee was off with a wave. "Hope you enjoy your dinner. Fish is a good choice tonight, Mr. Porter." Meg looked at me curiously and asked, "What book? Did you write another book, Jeff?" "No, it's the same one." Dee told me she was taking a philosophy course and remembered that I had written a book on the subject. Her father had been such a good friend and has kept me well fed since Jane's death. I gave Dee a copy, never thinking it would be more than just a tool to help her through a boring course requirement. I used the waiter's arrival to end the conversation. When the waiter left with our order of the seafood special of the day, Meg leaned across the table. I know what you're about, Mr. Porter. I grew up with you, remember? So let's not be Mr. Modest here. The book you wrote caused a total panic with the powers that be in established religions. You had to drop out of sight for a couple of years. You still get death threats from Christians, Muslims, and occult followers. Every critic has all but banned your book, but yet it's been read by almost everyone. You've always developed a following that will defend you to your death. The power elite of the blacks hate you. The Israelis have banned you from conducting any further research in their country, which of course they say is for your own safety. But we know they're really afraid of what you are looking for and how you will use it once you find it. That information could topple their way of life. You are the 21st century version of Martin Luther. Now young girls change their majors after reading your book? She paused for a second and accusingly shot out. Now you know about the glass and how it works, don't you? I have known and loved Uncle Roger since childhood. He meets you for the first time and tells you, no, shows you the glass. He's always been vague whenever I mention the glass to him. She was getting louder by the second, so I broke in. Meg, all that you say is true, but what am I to do? That was then, this is... Between clenched teeth, she finished my catchphrase. Now. I do not know any more about the glass than you. I was hoping we could find some common background on what we do know. Why don't you start with Roger?